Hey everybody, it's Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And I'm alive.
Yes,
I'm alive.
we're here. It's alive.
I'm
We're
alive.
here for episode 167 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. It has been a very long time. Um, it has been. It will be worth the wait, I hope, because at long last, enough time has passed for Victoria to have time to read through the books. Hopefully, it's been enough time for you guys to also read through the first two Young Whit books. Because I feel like you may not believe some of the things that we tell you otherwise.
I
Back 2 months ago,
I don't think I would have believed everything Devin would have told me if
back
I just
two
got him
months
to give me a
ago, when I
synopsis.
read both of these books in this course of a week, and I wanted so bad to tell Victoria about what happened, I was like jumping up and down. I was like, Victoria, you
He was
cannot
jumping up and down, I can confirm.
understand the things that they have chosen to do with the canon of Adventures in Odyssey.
And I said, and I quote, "You're right, now get out of my room.
Yes.
I
Okay.
have to study for finals."
Yeah. So, we're talking about both of the first two books today, which is good. I'm glad that we're talking about them both together.
Got my Kindle.
What happened in the first book, Victoria, which is called Young Whit and the Traitor's Treasure?
So, Whit, or as he's called, Johnny, which makes me want to throw up in my mouth. I'm not going to call him that.
It is uncomfortable.
They, okay, some of the stuff from Thank You God happens at the end of the second book, and they changed enough so that he's called Johnny by everyone in the lines from Thank You God, and they also put Charlotte in those scenes, and I'm like, ah, yes, exactly what we need.
Well, we were dealing with Whit's narration of the events, and thank you, God. Clearly, he selectively left some rather significant things in his life out that were going on during that period, because
Yeah.
he didn't want to be committed.
Maybe his mind gets erased at the end of this.
Yeah, maybe they
I
find the
wish
other.
my mind would get erased at the end of this series.
Maybe they find the other cloth that erases your memories when you put it on you.
I wish I could have that for some episodes of Odyssey, and also some
Okay, what happens in the
books.
Trader's Treasure, Victoria?
Um. Okay, so Whit and his family move to Providence, and there they meet a young girl and her little sister.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is, I believe, Amelia.
Sorry, whose little sister? The Emmys? I don't remember. It's been
I
2 months.
think Emmy's full name is actually Amelia, we find out.
Well, that would make sense because she is
Yeah.
Italian.
So Emmy, turns out, was Whit's best friend as a kid. His first friend in Providence
Mm-hmm.
is the secondary main character in these books. I flipped out.
It's pretty cool. I really like
The
Emmy, and I love their
I love
friendship.
Emmy. I love Emmy. I've always wanted more Emmy content, but I never thought I'd actually get it, and now I am. And I'm gonna get young Jack and young Emmy content, and I'm gonna die. I'm so excited. Jack isn't in these two books, and I missed him so
Yeah, he doesn't show up
much.
until May
The next book
May
is coming out in
14th. Yes.
November, I thought.
No, I mean Jack doesn't show up until May of 1936.
Oh,
May
is that the
14th.
year this is?
No, this starts out August 1935, and then May 14th, 1936 is the day that Whit meets Jack, according to the Journal of Whit.
Shroud of Secrecy, not sorcery. Might as well be.
Just tell me what happens in
Takes
the
place
Trader's
partially
Treasure.
during Halloween. So Traitor's Treasure is what it has to do like this family tree assignment for school, and he's just like, I know all about my family tree, and then he goes on for a really long time about all his relatives, and Devin dies and takes a billion notes. Um, so Whit covers the fact that he had relatives on the Confederate side of the army during the not Civil War.
The Civil War, yes.
Okay, yeah, the Civil War. And the... What's the other side called again?
The Union.
Redcoat?
The Union Army. The Redcoats were the British during the Revolution.
Okay. Yeah, so those guys.
Uh-huh.
And then people say that like one of Whit's relatives was a traitor or something like that, and then like Whit befriends the janitor of the school, who's another main character in the series. His name is Ben. His grandfather, I believe it was his grandfather, used to be a slave during the war. And his grandfather was the slave of the grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather?
Yes.
Great-grandfather of our other main character. It's Wilson. And he's the school bully. And he's such a little jerk. I was so upset. And he has a thing for Emmy, which he's very clear about all the time. Actually, he could have been so much worse. He could have acted like Jay. He didn't go full Jay.
No, never go full Jay.
He could
unfortunately.
have. He didn't. So that's a thing, at least. I think it's funny, because, like, that means, like, Jack stole the girl that Wilson... What was it? Okay. No, I had it all figured out.
Yes, you did. Go on. That's okay. You got it.
Whit stole... No, Jack stole the girl that Wilson liked. Whit stole the girl that Jack liked. And Wilson stole Whit's sister.
Yes.
I think that was it. Yeah. So it's a cycle of retaliation where no one wins.
Or everyone won, because they all ended up in happy marriages.
That's true. It actually worked out better this way. Jax was a little unhappy at some parts near the end. But...
Well, yeah, I mean, and Wilson and Charlie's lasted for 6 weeks.
Yeah, and Whit and Jenny had a pretty sad ending there, too. But
well, yeah, but with a lot of good times in there.
Jack and Joanne, though, they're happy, yay!
Yeah, I'm sure, don't worry, Joanne won't show up until the 3rd book, probably.
I can't wait to find out that Joanne was Wilson's sister the whole time.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, I could. That's the problem.
Okay, what else happens in the story?
There's like this conspiracy between like Wilson's great-grandfather betrayed some people, and people think it was actually Whit's grandfather, and then Whit gets like this like kind of chest kind of thing with like a journal in it and a bunch of other things, and from his grandfather, which Harold, Whit's dad, was very upset did not pass to him and passed to Whit instead. And inside there are many things.
Well, it's his maternal grandfather, to be clear. It was Jackson, not Harold's father.
So like the list has a bunch of names of people throughout like Whit's family, and ends with his name, and he's like, that's weird, gonna ignore that, I guess. And then there's this cloth in the bag, in the box or whatever, and he kind of ignores it.
But it's just not important.
It's not important. Oh my gosh. And then a bunch of things that I didn't really understand happened. Long story short, they figure out that like there's this guy who's like
quite a clever riddle, I must say.
People thought he was a ghost, but he was just a guy that was running around being mean.
Basically, the entire town hated Whit's great uncle and thought that he'd stolen a bunch of Confederate gold and attacked Wilson's great-grandfather, but it turns out it was the other way around, and it was Wilson's great-grandfather who did it, and that the ghost of, what's his name, Knox, who was, like, running around, Thaddeus Knox, it was actually Wilson's uncle pretending to be a ghost and kidnapping Mystery Boy, who we still don't know who that is after 2 books.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. And then Whit solves all this and everything's good. Wilson finds out his family's a sham. He takes it really hard.
He takes it very hard.
I felt bad for him, honestly. I liked him a little at the end of the book, and then he went back to being a horrible person in the second book.
In fairness, he was idolizing his family for being like Confederates, so.
Kind of like Sharpay in every High School Musical movie, no matter how hard they try to pass her off as nice. Later on.
So,
in the next
how does
movie.
and what happens in the epilogue of the book, Victoria?
Whit murders a dog.
He stabs the dog. I thought it was going to be Jack in the Bush, honestly.
Shoots a dog with an arrow.
With a sword.
Monster. Oh, no. Yeah, sorry. He has a sword and he stabs a dog.
Yes.
Like a puppy. And the puppy dies.
And then...
Fun for the whole family.
Yeah.
The end.
Yes. But wait. So Whit is like,
or
oh no,
this is also how it could have ended.
I'll tie you up with the cloth, my cape that I made out of the cloth in the trunk, and then I run away, and then I come back, and then the dog is completely healed, and there's no wound, and the cloth has been folded, and there's no blood on it.
The dog swears fealty to him. It's his dog now.
And Whit decides to name it Macduff because there's clearly no emotional baggage that he has going on there to name the dog the same name as his previous dog that died.
I like to think he never realized that you can have pets that have different names.
Yeah. And then he runs back to the house and he eavesdrops on his dad talking to another professor who translated the phrase from the book. And he's all like...
Oh, yeah, there was a phrase in the book. I didn't mention that.
And he's like, yes, it is connected to an ancient like legend of this cloth that heals, and it's magic. And that's the end of the first book. So should we talk about the books one at a time, or all together?
Yeah, we'll talk about one at a time.
So, first book.
I have some notes that I took.
The first book is written by Phil Lawler.
It was weird. Actually, the second one was weird, too.
The opening scene of the first book opens with like Whit in some sort of ethereal dream state, and it's all blue, and he's blue, and everything's nothing and falling and blue, and then he hears intense screaming.
And then like that song from Iron Man 3.
And he hears increasing screams that he knows his mom. He's like, oh, it's my mom screaming, as he's just like falling, and it's blue and nothingness. And honestly, I thought that this was him being born. I thought
like it was the beginning of Assassin's Creed.
That I thought was like. This is like this opening scene of Assassin's Creed 2, and we're witnessing Whit being born because he's like in this ethereal space of not knowing anything physically around him, and he hears screams, and he like knows instinctively it's the screams of his mother. I was like, are we witnessing Whit being birthed?
Because you know how the inside of women are blue.
Well, it's like, you know, weird brain space, infant amnesia, whatever.
Inside women?
Yes. I'm a biologist. It was an interesting prologue. I was like, I'm very much looking forward to taking a deep dive into Whit's early childhood trauma, so we're off to a great start there after the first, 2 pages.
I just want to say, thought you couldn't fool me. You could write a character named Wellington, yes. And I wouldn't notice. I did. I highlighted it. I did notice.
There's probably a lot of notes in here about me trying to figure out the timeline of things before I actually figured it out. And since I have actually figured it out, there's probably no use in me reading notes about me musing about it. The episode after next, we're going to do an updated version of our Whit's lore episode, the first lore that we did, because we've learned about twice as much as we knew back when we did that episode originally. There's a lot more detail, especially after these books.
I have some notes that I want to talk about on this page about Ben.
Well, okay, can we get further in the story?
Yes.
Towards there?
I only took 2 notes.
Okay.
One of them was the Wellington note.
Whit mentions very early on in the book when he's talking about Providence that the clock tower in Providence is stuck. And I don't remember all the details of the story in the Inspiration Station, but I would assume that this is the clock tower that Whit is going to try and fix and accidentally make it turn backwards and will inspire him to think about time travel, as is described in the Inspiration Station. It makes sense because this one's already broken, and this is where Whit
I
grew
mean,
up.
there's one point where he's already talking about time travel, I think, in book 2.
Yes, that is correct. They make a lot of like trying to be like, look, this is where Whit got this idea for the future. Like there's like a nudge about like even Wadfam chalk sods in book 2 and stuff like that.
I just kind of get the vibe that like the writers are imagining
Phil.
the readers.
It's just Phil.
Yeah. It makes me feel less bad when I pretend I don't know who wrote it.
I know.
I just kind of get the vibe that like people expected readers to be like, oh, it's like, oh, that's so, and I was just reading, I was like,
Yeah, that's what I was like. I love that
because I'm not allowed to feel joy.
I love that Whit moves to a town that just happens to have like a giant, ancient, mysterious, abandoned mansion, because of course it does. The books really make a very strong focus on giving you a lot of extremely shockingly specific details about stuff. Like they make it really clear when things are happening, because they say, oh, the Great Depression has been going on for nearly 6 years.
They talk about the Great Depression a lot. I actually kind of liked that.
Which puts the book squarely in 1935, since the Great Depression started at the end of October in 1929, and Harold being about to start his job puts us at the end of August, which is confirmed multiple times. So the Great Depression would be 5 years and 10 months deep, which matches what Whit said. And then Whit is about to turn 9. He's going to turn 10 on October 1st, which he then later does in the next book, which shows finally, explicitly, that Whit was born in 1926, which means that he was 16... Wait, sorry. No, this note is back when I had it by a year off. He's about to turn 10. Whit was born in 1925, which means he was 17 when Guadalcanal's campaign happened in World War II, and he would have turned 18 shortly thereafter, which all lines up perfectly with what we know about when he was drafted, because that was right near the beginning of his first year of college, which we hear in Great Expectations. Oh, it's solved. It's good. It's canon. It's exciting.
Happy. So he's, what, 91?
He is, no, 93.
That's actually not that bad.
He turns 94 on October 1st this year.
Like, I can actually believe him still being alive if he's...
Well, alive. Maybe
90s.
Not as spry as he is, but, whatever.
No, definitely not as spry as he is, but at least being alive.
Yeah. So Whit has this natural penchant for getting into trouble. Like, I was like, only Whit could be climbing down from a water tower because he was trying to power car batteries with a lightning rod, and then look next door to the large, ancient, abandoned mansion and see a dirty young ragamuffin being set upon by a cloaked, hooded man with a dagger and rope. Wait, you've lived in this town? Like it's
a Charles Dickens novel.
You've lived in this town for 3 days. 3 days. Yeah. Also, Whit's street address is 413, so Whit is a Homestuck. Confirmed. 413 Magnolia Lane.
Whit, looks over and he sees Pip being chased in the beginning of Great Expectations playing out, and he's like, huh, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then he almost gets Tom Novacommed and almost falls off the tower.
Yeah. We got more lore. I have a lot of notes just being excited about lore, and I'm not going to talk about most of them here because that'll all be covered in the Whit's lore thing.
I like the bits with Charlie.
The timeline... Sorry?
I like the bits with Charlie.
Yeah. The timeline is so
Charlie was written good for being a younger sibling. Like the bit in the second book where Whit and Charlie are awake at the same time, and Whit basically blackmails her into not saying that he was awake when he wasn't supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then she tricks him into thinking she's gonna sell him out the next day. I was just like, this is some good writing.
Just to be like,
for siblings.
Remember, I hold your life in my hands. Speaking of...
I'm gonna make her an offer she can't refuse. That's my Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation.
Speaking of, we also have an age gap for Whit and Charlie. She is 4 3/4 currently, and Whit is 9 and 11 months, which gives them an age gap of about 5 years and 2 months.
So how old was Charlie when she got married then?
I don't know, because we don't know how old Whit was.
Okay.
They were in their like late 20s, early 30s, it sounded like. So we get more lore. Honestly, half of my notes are like talking myself through figuring out calculations of dates and stuff. Being excited about finding out people's names and maiden names and parent names and stuff like that. Emily shows up. I was so excited. And then we find out...
You mean Emmy?
Yeah, I said Emily.
You said Emily.
Yeah.
I thought her name was Amelia.
Her name is Emily, and Emmy is short for Emily, which I suppose in Italian would be Amelia.
Oh,
but
okay.
Emily is what Jack always calls her, unless he's being really emotional and personal.
Yeah.
So we find out that Harold Whittaker was good friends with Arthur Conan Doyle, and that, which at first I was like, this is literally young Indiana Jones is what these books are. Like, I cannot believe that Whit is canonically so old and well-connected that he met Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in person. I never would have guessed that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle lived long enough to be alive at the same time as Whit. I was like, how many non-supernatural characters in fiction are alive in 2019 that can claim that they're old enough to have met Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? That don't have some kind of... Although, you know what? I don't know if it can count as a non-supernatural character anymore now, in retrospect.
We'll get to that. I remember you and I talking about the Whit reading it. How old was he when you read?
He was 3 or 4.
Yeah. And everyone was just like, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was so impressed when he read the book. And I messaged Devin. I was like, I know enough about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to know that he would think that he like poisoned the mind of this young child by making him read his bad mystery books. Sir Arthur and Conan Doyle hated nothing more than Sherlock Holmes.
And then also, this is another confirmation of the date, because Whit visited him when Whit was 4, just before Conan Doyle died, which was in July 1930, which is another independent confirmation that Whit was born in 1925. I like how with the whole big ancient abandoned mansion thing, Whit is like, I mean, most small towns probably have an abandoned spooky mansion. I'm like, no, Whit, they really don't. This isn't normal.
I mean, please don't normalize what you're going through. If we looked hard enough, probably find one in Castlegar.
Maybe out in Pass Creek somewhere.
But you'd still find one.
Once you deliver pizza out there enough, you learn that there are some things that could never be found if you didn't know where they were. Houses and people. It would be so easy to hide from the government out there. Whit was born only 7 years after Steve Rogers. I want that to sink in for everyone, just how old Whit is. So, like, young Whit is just so canonically OP, comically OP, that, like, he read Hound of the Baskervilles at 4. It's a stretch. I'll give it to you. At 9, having not only the idea, but the instinct to grab a hose and spray it on a helium balloon to bring it down before it had time to float out of reach of the spray of the hose, I was going to let that slide. But when he starts Vulcan nerve-pinching bullies, that was too far for me. He was like,
I can't stretch my sense of disbelief that far, guys.
He's like, oh, I only have a second. Let me pull my shoelace out and MacGyver it with a mop to create a trap on this door. I'm like, stop. So, yeah. Wilson's a thing. He's around. I was like, I can see now why Whit felt the way he did when he found out that Wilson was going to marry his sister. I get it.
Yeah. No, I get it too.
I mean, obviously, their relationship changed over time. There's a lot more development that will happen, as we learned from, like, No Friend Like an Old Friend. But, still, I was like, I get it now. It's not like
they had a good relationship, though.
No. But I feel like it got more amicable than it is here over time.
Definitely. He's, like, selling bad assignments, like, for money, and he's like, Emmy, I'll give you, like, a $1 discount.
And then
you're hot.
By No Friend Like an Old Friend, he basically turns into, like, Javert, like, lawful evil. I like how Whit expected Wilson to not know that the bathroom thing with the door and the mop and the shoelace was him because he replaced the shoelace when he yelled loudly to Luke while he did it. And Wilson knew what his voice sounded like already. He's like, Luke, get out of there. And he's like, he'll never know it was me because my shoelace is back.
Well, the thing I was thinking about is the fact that, like, his shoelace probably looks nothing like Emmy's shoelace. He's just going to have two very clearly different shoelaces. Like, one's going to be white, and one's going to be, like, hot pink. And he's going to be like, no one will ever catch on to my scheme.
I don't think a lot of people had hot pink shoelaces during the Great Depression, but I could be wrong.
You weren't alive back then. You don't know.
I'd also like to point out that as obscenely old as Whit is, we now know that Wilson is 2 years older because he's a grade higher than Whit, and he also skipped a year.
You know what that means?
Or Whit skipped a year, sorry, which means Wilson is 95 plus or minus 1.
You know what that means?
What?
He's a cradle snatcher. What? Think about how older he would be than Charlie.
Yeah.
Isn't Whit like 9 and Charlie's like 4?
Yeah, it's a 5-year age gap.
And then plus add 2 years.
So 7 years.
Yeah.
That is a fair gap, yeah. If it was like, if Whit is in his early 30s, let's say Charlie's like 27, Wilson's like 34, that's not that bad by that point in your life.
Charlie was 1 and Wilson was 8 and he was babysitting her, he could have
killed her. He doesn't know how to look after a baby. I like the fact that Jack isn't going to show up for basically Whit's entire first year of these books, because it gives us time to really explore his relationship with all these other characters before those two become joined at the hip more so than probably anyone else.
I still miss him.
I know. And we find out, super not OP, Whit also knows earth martial arts in addition to his Venusian Aikido because he's the third doctor.
Okay, before you said that second part, I was like, earth martial arts? I was thinking, you've been watching too much Good Omens.
Yeah, no. Whenever someone does this shoulder pinch, I don't think of Star Trek. I think of, like, the third doctor.
I never got that far, really. I only got into, like, his
Venusian Aikido.
His first serial.
So, you can read your stuff on Ben. If you want.
Okay. So, there's this one quote that really rubbed me the wrong way. And, like, I've done...
Okay, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I've done, like, a lot of history classes at UBC and stuff. One was on U.S. history, and I've also done an American Lit class, and I've done, like, various other history classes for, like, countries around the world and stuff. Mostly European, but I've covered America, Europe, Germany, England.
You did Chinese history, didn't you?
Chinese history, and yeah. And then Canadian history all throughout elementary school, which I think that's like a fair chunk of the world, I'd say. Okay, so Emmy's jaw dropped. Your grandfather was Thaddeus' slave? Ben smiled. Now why do you look so surprised? Slavery only ended in this country 70 years ago. Most all black folk around here have had a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent who was a slave. And there's some older folks still alive who was slaves themselves. I'm sorry, I'm reading it the way it's written. I don't know if that's bad to read it that way or not. Okay, so slavery was still a thing at this point in time. Slavery is still a thing today. I get that, like, slavery was dying out in this point in America, but, like, slavery didn't end as soon as, like... Lincoln said, hey guys, let's not do this anymore. It's not cool. Like, lots of people, in fact, most people, didn't get rid of their slaves for a very, very long time after that because they didn't want to, and it would have meant them losing a lot of money. So they still illegally owned, like, their slaves. And this went on for, like, a very, very long time. Even people, like, getting new slaves and stuff like that and just, like, keeping it a secret. So, like, slavery didn't end 70 years ago in the States. from this point in time, it was still like, it still lasted a long time after all that. So I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah. And
Because
I mean, you
I
could,
feel like the fact that like an African American character is saying this line, I feel like if this was actually like a historical, legitimate like story where like if you could actually isolate Ben and he was a real life person and you could talk to him about slavery, I feel like he would know and be able to confirm that slavery did not end 70 years ago.
there's like, there's a couple ways where you'd be like, well, maybe he didn't know that because there was still a little communication, or it's
But I
like,
feel
oh,
like
he
he
didn't
would
want to
have
tell them.
known.
But I feel like they would probably
I
know
feel like
that.
he would know.
You could make excuses for it, but at the end of the day, it does come down to like Phil Lawler's writing, or just willful not wanting to have to get into all of that for the people reading the book, rather than saying that Ben
Like
as a character
it
wasn't
is
aware
like
of
a
that.
really messy subject, so I get like not delving into it, but at the same time, I feel like you could still just mention it. Like you don't have to deeply address it, but you
Yeah.
could just, or
Especially since
maybe
it's
just
such a
not say a
pervasive theme throughout the
concrete
book.
number. Like you don't have to say 70.
Yeah.
Just say like, hey, slavery is pretty much done in the States. But yeah.
I feel like it would bear putting in just because slavery is like so important in this book.
Exactly. And the fact that like they talk about it and they talk about the characters and they talk to characters who were slaves and stuff,
And it,
or at least had very strong ties to them.
yeah. It like, yeah, I was hoping that it was going to come up a lot in the book because they start talking a lot about focus on the Civil War and stuff. I didn't realize before that North Carolina was like in the South. I guess because it has North in the name. I never realized that it was like part of the Confederacy. And so Whit is, at first, when he's working on this project, he's really excited about finding relatives on both sides of the war, which was very confusing to me. I was like, he sounds very weirdly excited at the thought of having relatives who fought to protect slavery, which I was thinking may actually be a point of importance because the book kept on also making repeated focus on Ben's scars and burns on his face. And they did that in both books, I think, and they still haven't really talked about it, so I assume that's something that's going to be something in the future still. Maybe it's related to his relationship with his dad. Ben is very good. And they keep on talking. Whit goes through his genealogy, and they just drown me in details. It was beautiful.
We need to talk about Harold.
We will. He's not really in the first book super much.
Yeah, but he still rubbed me the wrong way in the first book.
The focus on the genealogy stuff is really heavy on the Civil War, particularly on those who fought for the South. So it's like, I have to believe this is going to be relevant, and obviously it was. Because Whit did say his favorite president was Lincoln, after all, in Album 7.
Yeah.
It took me so long to get through the beginning of the book, the first couple chapters, because I was taking so many notes and checking cross-references and researching dates online and stuff in Whit's childhood. But
there's a surprising amount of detail about Janeth.
Yeah. But then I was like actually getting through reading it because I thought it was past the introductory exposition. So I'm like, I'm safe for a little bit. I can just read. And then they went and made it a central plot point of the book that Whit is researching his family history. And I'm just like, typing.
I remember I was reading it and they're like, oh, we're going to do stuff about our family trees. And I was like, Devin's going to die.
Yeah. They were like, there was so much to his family's story, says the narration. I was like, that's the understatement of the book. I really want to know how much of this information was in the original Whit Bible that they wrote in like 1987. Like, did it have as many specific...
I highly doubt Emmy was, like, in
probably
lore.
not. But, like, did it have...
I doubt Jack was in the original lore.
Did it have as many specific dates about Whit's ancestors and parts of his life? Did it have the location where Harold's plane crashed in World War I? The specific infantry of Harold's grandfather? The precise day that Whit's mom's dad's brother died? Because that's all in this book.
I don't know.
It's crazy.
This is like the world of Remnant of Odyssey.
Yeah, so he gives this presentation and he realizes suddenly that everyone in his class hates him now and he doesn't know why. And I was like, I mean, who needs his classmates if they hate him because he's the only person in town who doesn't like slavery, apparently, which is how it comes across at first.
He doesn't.
I know, but I'm saying, like, at first he assumes, like, oh, they hate him because he had a relative who fought for the North.
Yeah.
And I was like, the fact that that attitude still exists today in large parts of the South is, like, terrifyingly astounding. It's like, that's still a thing.
Slavery is bad, guys. We shouldn't have to tell you that.
Also, speaking of how, like, old the stuff in the book is, the Whit's efforts to translate the phrase that's in the journal, I was like, imagine living in a time where you find a phrase in another language and you have to just find a university professor to then ask their other colleagues to find out what it means instead of just being able to put it into Google Translate auto-detect.
When was Google created?
In the early 90s, I think.
Okay.
Google Translate probably wasn't created until years later, but I'm like, I can't believe you can't even just... Do they not have dictionaries at the library for other languages?
I mean, probably not all libraries.
It just seems weird to me that, like, you would need that much. Like, you have to go to a university professor of languages, and then he has to send it out to his other multiple colleagues just to find someone who would be capable of translating, like, 6 words.
I mean, like, you probably, one, you might not have a book for that specific language, like a dictionary for it. And 2, even if you do translate, like, a couple of the words, that doesn't mean it will make sense word for word.
I know, but, like, he didn't even try to, like, look at what dictionaries, like language dictionaries they had in the library or at the university library for that matter.
Yeah, well,
they definitely should have had one for
Cut
Gaelic.
him a break, although he's also MacGyver, so...
They should have had one for Old Scots Gaelic, I would think, but I could
There
be
was
wrong.
this box of gloves at work the other day for, like, food save stuff, and I was wearing one of them, and the English slogan for the gloves was, gives good glovin', which was horrible. The French version was like, a la main sur le coeur. And I was just like, how does that translate to give good glovin'?
Well, clearly it's one of those cases where they came up with something good in English and they couldn't come up with anything for French, so they were just like, nah.
They're like, for the hand on your heart or something.
Yeah. I love the like no-name cheesies or whatever, and the French name is like fromage d'able or whatever.
And then the English version's just like
good cheese or whatever. Yeah.
Or whatever.
That's clearly
like,
one.
That's not as funny.
That's one where they clearly came up with it in French first.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess I have more perspective on this from when I wrote the note now about, like, why did Jackson give the chest to Whit but not give it to Janeth? Like, why did he skip a generation? Like, is it just because she was a girl and he's like, oh, I need to pass it down?
You mean because Whit's like
But then it was like, why didn't David get it? But yeah, now that I have more perspective, maybe it's because he was like, you're undead. You've been larsed with this cloth.
Whit's actually a zombie, surprise. That's the point where I started yelling. I was like, okay, the rest of this has been pretty crazy, with it turning out that the Jesus cloth episode of Odyssey is now more relevant than I ever thought it would be.
The funny thing about it is that
Whit's a zombie.
We hear the episode and it's like, oh, Whit isn't getting freaked out about the Jesus cloth because he doesn't want to be sensationalist about it. But in reality, we know what happened was he looked at this, he was like, this didn't belong to Jesus. I know, because, like, I already have enough experience there. I've already had more than my fair share of dealings with cloths that have touched Jesus's body in my possession.
I thought you were going to say Whit looked at it and he was like, not my problem, and then he left, and that's why he was gone for the majority
it's funny,
of the episode.
I'll put up a Skype message that you sent me here, Victoria, while you were like halfway through the book. It says,
oh, which one?
Watch to turn out that Whit died as a baby and the cloth was used to heal him, and that's why he inherited it. If his mom's death is connected to the cloth and it turns into a monkey's paw thing, I'm gonna flip. These books are so weird.
Wait, I actually wrote that?
Yes.
I slightly remember that, but that was after I found out that Whit actually died as a kid or whatever.
Oh, well, I don't think he died. I think he was just really sick.
Oh, okay.
I don't think
But that was after I found that out. That wasn't me guessing that something bad was going to happen to Whit as a kid.
Oh, okay.
In case you thought
I thought that was just a really good prediction.
No,
I didn't
no,
want to
that
ask
was
where you
after I
were
read
because I
that
didn't
book.
want to tip you off. But no, I don't think he died. I think he was just like seriously ill or had some like terrible accident happen. Like they dropped a Colonel Sassacre's tome on him or something like that.
I think that either Janet's death is going to be connected to Whit coming back to life or being healed or
Well,
whatever.
I mean, she died.
Or Whit is going to think it has some connection. It's
She
not going
died
to.
from smallpox, though, and that was like.
That's what they want you to think, Devin.
She died 6 years later, though.
Yeah. So they wouldn't suspect.
She stayed alive just to zag on him.
The original McElroy sibling.
It's funny. I just listened to the first episode where Forbes announced their 30 under 30 media luminary, and like Travis and Justin are still losing their minds about it, and they're like, this is the first week of 2017. We've all been trying to figure out how we're going to zag on him, but Forbes has already pulled a bigger zag on us than any of us could ever pull over the next 12 months.
Oh, that's so sad.
It's very buried sin, don't you think? Like learning that your great uncle shot your contemporary's great grandfather in the head.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely not dinner table conversation, I'd say.
But it feels very much like the episode Buried Sin. And also, if it's true that GW did do that, then he really is a hero stealing from the Confederate army like that. And I'm really glad Emmy pointed that out. She realized the same thing. She's like, I mean, the Confederates were the bad guys. So, like, he did do a good thing taking the gold if it's true. Assuming it's true, it's not like he did with noble intent, but the results were still good, at least. I'm glad that Emmy, not only living, but being originally from there, has the guts to call it like it is and recognize that the Confederates are the villains in the war.
I love Emmy so much.
Which is a lot better than some people today call out. I love so much the relationship between Whit and Emily, and the fact that we know for almost certain that there's never going to be a thing between them, because it just lets me relax and just enjoy this awesome relationship without having to like dread an upcoming forced romance side plot. And I'm just really glad about that.
Yeah, I'm such a sucker for like...
Especially because that would just hurt Jack more down the road if that happened anyways, on top of, you know.
I'm such a sucker for like different gender relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I am.
Yeah.
Like, basically everything I've ever written has, like, a male and female character who are best friends and not romantically involved in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone who reads it starts shipping them.
And then you swat them with a rolled-up newspaper.
I lose my mind. Like, when I wrote that short story that was turned into a play.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the first short story I ever wrote. And then everyone in my class was just like, we shipped them so hard. And I was just like, well, I'm trying to leave it ambiguous, and they're kind of friends, and everyone was like, no, we ship them, and I was like, And then I started writing ASU right after that, and then one of the...
Which was basically created out of spite in terms of the concept of Emily.
It wasn't completely created out of spite. I disagree with that.
Well, I don't mean like...
Although it was like kind of building off of the stepping stone of some things in As the Night.
Yeah.
And then like one lady in my class who wanted to read a couple chapters ahead and was super cool and nice. She met Dusk and read the first chapter with him, and she was just like, ooh, love triangle. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? And I laughed in her face. And I feel really bad about that to this day. And yeah, I laughed in her face and really loudly said, no. Like, I'm Peridot. And yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
No,
it was really mean of me.
It was the correct thing to do.
It was so mean of me, though.
So even though, like, I know you have your qualms with the way that Ben talked about the slavery, but I'm still glad that they're having these moments of, like, reflection on the Confederacy and just how recent it is for the sake of the audience, because obviously the story takes place a long time ago, but there are still people alive today whose grandparents were slaves. Obviously, they are very old and their grandparents were very old, but there are still people alive today whose grandparents were slaves. We are not that far from it, despite how it feels for a lot of people. And so I'm glad that the books put this emphasis on like realizing how close we still are to that time-wise. And I mean, segregation is so much closer than that. Like, the first black girl to ever go to a desegregated high school in the United States is still alive, and she's not even that old. So we finally, Whit starts untangling the mystery with the riddle, which I think the riddle was very clever. I never would have figured out. There was like parts I figured out right away, but like I didn't know that whatever that
You
word
figured
was.
out some of the riddle? I was just like, I give up.
I figured out like one or two words, but like I never knew that heart meant deer or stuff like that.
The only riddle I've ever figured out in like anything basically, other than that one for the math test.
There's like the clock, the one that was clock, that was easy.
Super proud of, where it was just like one person always lies and one person always tells the truth, and I figured it out, and that is a badge of honor I'll wear till I die. This one Sarah J. Maas book, one of the like climaxes of the book is entirely centered around this riddle, and if the main character can figure it out, then like everything will be good, but until she does, like everything is gonna be really bad, and she's gonna have to like fight all these monsters and be tortured and stuff. And I was so annoyed because I figured out the riddle immediately upon hearing it, and there were still like 150 pages left. The main character doesn't figure out till like the last 5 pages, and I was so upset because it was so obvious to me. And then I watched like a lot of other people like review and talk about the book after it first came out, and a very alarming amount of people like were the only ones that figured out the riddle upon first hearing it. It was a romance series, and the answer to the riddle was love. And it was like, what is a powerful source of blah, 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 and it was really long, and I remember the entire time I read it the first time, like one answer in, like one line in, I was like, it's love, and I just kept on yelling, it's love.
That was me so being annoyed at like the final question that Hodgepodge had in the Crystal Kingdom. And I figured it out immediately when it's like, ask me something I don't know.
I re-listened to the new Taz recently. I'm still not done it because like when it originally came out, or like the new Taz live show from like a month ago, so not really that new.
Oh, I thought you meant the last episode. Anyway,
no,
we should get back to the book.
Where Hodgepodge comes in, and I forgot it was Hodgepodge, and everyone's like, "Is it John?"
So we're unraveling the mystery, finding out, what's going on. And Ben is like...
I couldn't figure out any of it. I gave up.
Well, I mean, yeah, I figured out like one of the couplets or two of them maybe, but the rest of it I never would have gotten. Anyways, the mystery is unraveling. We're finding out more about what happened in the past. And Ben's like, oh yeah, GW hates slavery. And I was like, so he hates slavery, but he fought for the Confederacy. Like, sorry, but that dog don't hunt. He can't claim any moral high ground while actively fighting against abolition. There was not I don't think there was a draft for the Confederate Army, and even if there was, if you hate slavery, you dodge the draft. Like, staying and trying to help the slaves there is good, obviously, and it could cancel out some of the evil, but it doesn't automatically cancel out all of the evil of helping fight in the war. It's still cool, obviously amazing, that he taught reading and writing to enough slaves that his name would be known across the state so many years later. But still fought in the army, so it's like, what are you doing? And then Whit's like, we need proof and things and such. Baby Whit breaking into government buildings. What a world that we're in. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that was it wasn't like sneak over the counter or something. He was breaking and entering under cover of night into like a government records building.
I love the way he like goes about sneaking out of the house. He's like, Dad, I'm gonna eat dinner at Emmy's. And then he's like, Emmy, tell your parents you're gonna eat dinner at my place. And she's like, okay, we're gonna eat dinner now? And he's like, no, we're gonna break the law. And then he like grabs her hand and they run off.
So Whit solves the riddle, and then we realize that Whit was visited by a vision of Grandpa Huck's ghost in the past. And he was like, this old black man was like telling me all these words. It was like heart and mind and soul and spirit and something else. And I was like, so that was Ben's grandpa that Whit saw in his dream. And he told him the answers to the riddle that Whit
and he still never figured it out.
He told him the answers to the riddle that Whit didn't even know existed yet. So that was just like a proper like vision, like a prophetic vision that Whit had. Yeah. And then he has like 3 more or so over this book and the next. He sees like a face talking to him in the cloth and has multiple like prophetic dreams and stuff. I'm like, they are really like,
don't even get me started about the cloth. We'll get to that.
Taking a lot of like surprisingly hardline stances on where they want to go with like kind of the theological setting of these stories compared to the way that they usually do other stuff in Odyssey. So it got very Scooby-Doo all of a sudden because it turns out that the ghost was just old man Uncle Racism the whole time. And then he was legitimately going to gut Emmy with a dagger.
Oh, yeah.
Which was pretty crazy. And then Emmy just killed a man with a rebar. She hits him in the head and knocks him down like a flight of, like a ladder down several stories.
Yeah, I had my arms up. I was tearing. I was like, I love Emmy so much.
And he like breaks through the stairs and goes down another story after that into the splintered wood. And I was like, oh my goodness, she just like killed someone.
I remember I was like reading. I was like, is she dead? I also yelled, Mama! Oh no, Emmy just killed a man, and like
put the rebar to his head.
Whatever
fell down the stairs and now he's dead.
Yeah,
Johnny.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, those were the lyrics I was singing.
Yeah, like I was sending messages to Victoria, being as vague as I could.
Your life has just begun. You're only 9 years old. Emmy, what are you doing?
I sent a message to Victoria. I was like, I just want to, I can't spoil it for her, but I'm like, Victoria, they just killed someone. So, and I'm like, I still can't figure out. There's this mystery boy, the one who was like getting grabbed by Uncle Racism at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with
And then he like rescued Whit by like flagging down the police and then disappeared because he's been dead for 50 years or whatever. And then
Is
he
that
like
kid supposed to be like
shows
a
up later.
slave or something?
And I was like, is it Jack? Is Jack the homeless mystery boy? And then one day he just shows up to school and never mentions it. Like, I have no idea. It still hasn't been resolved. Can you imagine if
Jack was the homeless mystery boy and they just decided to leave that out of the journal of John Avery Whittaker?
It's just
like one thing we've been talking about is how much Whit edits his,
I know. It turns out Whit is the most unreliable narrator in the series.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, he's like, some of the biggest adventures can happen in the smallest of towns. And I'm like, don't try and insert your like new tagline for AIOO, like may your heart be your guiding key, some kind of crap into here now. 31
It turns out Whit's actually said that line in every single episode.
But he just whispers
even
it really
when he was gone and on the site on the archaeological dig and stuff like that for a while. He's just been whispering it really quietly.
That's why only Goofy could hear it with his ears. His big dog ears.
Only Connie can hear it with her big dog ears.
Only when she eats walnut. Only when she eats walnuts.
I didn't even think about it. Yeah, with her dumb ears. It works. It works, yeah.
So, yeah, there's at the end of this book, there's an impressively good number of like hanging mystery threads that are still unresolved. Some are resolved in book 2. Some of them are still going. Obviously, the family trunk, and then the cloth happens at the end. There's like what about Ben and like the burns and scars he's talking about, other stuff as well. The real reason we find out at the end that Jack and Emily were so perfect together was their ability to come up with the exact same nickname for Whit.
Yes. I thought someone else at school came up with the nickname Whit.
It was Jack. Yeah.
It was?
It was Jack.
Oh, they're perfect. They were meant for each other.
So, yeah, the epilogue happens. Whit stabs the dog. I was flabbergasted. I thought it was going to be the mystery boy in the.
So
I thought it was going to be the mystery boy in the bushes, and Whit stabbed him. Honestly,
me too. I was like, I thought that was going to be our new friend, and it's dead. And then a dog came out, and I was like almost in tears, and I was just like, if Paul kills this dog, I will never forgive him.
It's funny because the dog happens. And I was like, oh, good. I was worried they were going to try and make this dog Macduff, which wouldn't make sense because we know Macduff was in Scotland. And then one page later...
Yeah, that was my reaction too.
One page later, I was like, wait, don't give your new dog the same name as your last dead dog. That's really weird. And then he goes back to the house and he overhears the conversation in the kitchen. I was like, what? No, what? No, Whit's family has an ancient legacy of protecting, like, the Turin Shroud. is this connected to the prophecy thing in the Blackgaard books? Is this why Whit is so old? Because he has a magic cape? That's what I wrote then. It turns out the answer is yes, except it's not the Turin Shroud. It's the shroud that was swaddling Jesus when he was in the manger as a baby, which is just as crazy.
See, the thing that, like, gets me is the fact that, like, when you first started reading this series and you were just losing your mind, and you're just like, there's some weird stuff with Whit and his character, and they go into some weird things, and I was just like, are they going to elaborate on the prophecy from the Blackgaard books? And he was just like,
Here's the
I
thing.
can't say.
It genuinely might be that.
I know.
Because it
and
wasn't...
you know what? It bothers me.
It wasn't a prophecy per se. That's what we keep calling it because we're making a joke out of it. What it was specifically was they found this really old paper in South America that was in a different language, and the only words that were in English were John Avery Whittaker. And we know that the last page of Whit's journal, that the journal's really old, it's all written in different languages, and the last 3 words written in it are John Avery Whittaker. So I don't know if the prophecy page from the Blackgaard novels is the last page of Whit's journal or not.
Do you think Whit, like, realized it was
I think it could be a genuine crossover of the two series.
Can you imagine? Okay, imagine this. The last page of the last book in this series, Whit realizes this was just a prank that Charlie came up with somehow. I don't know how.
His hyper-intelligent 4-year-old sister.
She's a Whittaker.
Touché.
If Whit can read the entire
She has only been a Whittaker for like 2
series
years, to be fair.
At 3 years old, Charlie can figure out how to pull off a good prank at 4.
She has been a Whittaker for a very short period of her life. I'd also like to point out, now that we've solidified the timeline a lot more, the time between Janeth dying and Harold marrying Fiona is between 0 and 1 year.
Yeah, and you know what? It really bothered me that Whit was just like, Fiona, you've never lost anything in your life. And I was like, what about her husband probably?
Yeah.
And she's like, you're right, I haven't. I was like, ooh, that marriage didn't end good.
It didn't.
Well, yeah.
It was a divorce, I believe, if I recall correctly.
Did they actually?
I think so. I can check.
Oh, I didn't think they actually said.
It says her husband left her a long time ago, is what Whit had said.
That's vague.
Yes.
You could interpret that as literally anything, including being abducted by aliens.
But it's also, who knows at this point. It's also weird because, like, Fiona was their housekeeper, and after Harold's wife died,
I forgot about that.
He married his housekeeper with it in an average window of 6 months after the death of his wife.
Yeah.
And I'm like...
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, with the Macduff name thing, I was wondering, like, my only theory there was, were there at least 2 times where they talked about Macduff and one of them had to be in America and one had to be in Scotland, and the only way that they could, like, resolve that plot hole was, like, Whit had 2 dogs that were both named Macduff, but as far as I can remember, the only time that he talked about Macduff with this specific time period was when he talks about Macduff back in Scotland spilling the chocolate cake batter all over the thing, and that doesn't... he never talks about Macduff being in America, so why would he do that? They were just covering
their bases, so they...
Maybe.
It's just like every dog's Macduff. It's like Edgar. Everything in the whole
Macduff
Edgar,
is the one who is mine, yeah.
Macduff is the one who is Whit's dog, except for Sherman. Oh no!
Macduff 3.
Sherman's like, I don't adhere to your constraints that you want to put upon me. I am Sherman, and you will fear me, and I will not be Macduff. To be fair, the name Macduff does not fit Sherman at all.
No. Macduff clearly has to be like a Scottish Terrier or something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, like I was saying before, watch the prophecy end up to be nothing, and it doesn't actually mean anything or something like that, and Whit just throws it away, and then Blackgaard finds it, and he's just like, oh, this must be a prophecy or something.
Well, they found it somewhere in South America on an archaeological dig, which would probably be explained by the fact that Whit did do some archaeology in the past, before like the beginning of the show, and he brought the journal with him, and it got lost or a page fell out or something like that, and then was later found by the weird old ancient professor man who mentored Blackgaard.
So I have two explanations. One, Whit finds out about the prophecy in the Blackgaard books, and he gets very upset. And he's like, "Not another one! What's going to be talking to me now? A pair of shorts?" And then he gets very upset, and then he just doesn't want to deal with all this again. Two, this is the explanation I like a lot better. Whit and Blackgaard take their pieces and they put them together, and it turns out when you put the pieces together,
you flip it over and it's the Declaration of Independence.
No, I was gonna say you actually see that Blackgaard's name was also on the sheet. He didn't think about it because he didn't know Blackgaard at the time.
Fated lovers.
Turns out they've been siblings. It's Parent Trap reboot. It's a Parent Trap reboot. Edwin doesn't exist in this canon.
They left, but it turns out Janeth wasn't actually dead. She's still alive in Scotland. She's survived.
Raising Blackgaard.
And then she
Have
remarried.
Fun adding this to your weird Blackgaard family theories, you weirdo.
To Regis and Edwin.
Yeah. Am I blowing your mind?
I love it. Oh, that's good.
We need to Parent Trap them. Howard went to Fiona too soon.
Well, that's true either way. I feel like it wasn't very emotionally healthy moving on kind of process.
We need to talk about Harold, and then we need to stop because we've already been going for an hour.
Yeah, let's you can talk about Harold quickly, or we can talk about him in the next book.
We'll talk about him in the next book.
Okay, so we'll switch recordings over now so that this saves properly. So let's talk about book 2 now. So, book 2, Young Whit and the Shroud of Secrecy, written by, I said they were both Phil Waller. That's incorrect. This one is written by Dave Arnold. My good boy. Dave Arnold, what happens in this book, Victoria, in numero 2?
I thought you were going to say Dave Arnold, what happens in this book, and I expected to hear Dave Arnold's voice. So, sorry, it's easier for me to think about it if I'm actually looking at it. So, in this book, it's a lot less than the last book.
Oh, I forgot to say before. It's also really interesting to get the perspective of all this stuff, given that Whit is not a Christian yet in these books.
Yeah.
And I think enjoy getting to see that, like, perspective from Whit.
I do too.
Sorry, go on.
All the parts in this book where this book has a lot more of Whit struggling with everything going around him and his relationship with God and stuff. And a lot of moments where he's just like, if God loves us, why did he take my mom away? And I was just like, oh my gosh. Let me see what I have. I'm clicking on all the wrong buttons. Okay, so this one, Whit tries to find out more about, like, the cloth and stuff like that, and what the heck is going on. And because of that, Harold's in this book a whole lot more than he was in the last one. He wasn't really in the last one much at all. So Whit gets help from Harold with, like, translating certain things. He realizes that, like, one of Harold's colleagues is trying to get his hands on the cloth and use it to heal his son who's in a wheelchair, who becomes friends with Whit. And it is also Halloween in this book, so at one point they go to, like, an abandoned mansion and stuff.
Abandoned mansion.
Which, is it different than the one from the last book?
No, it's the same one.
They need to stay out. They need to board that place up. Lots of shady stuff happens there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's this thing with this alcohol, I think, called rakia.
Yes. Well, it's just moonshine. The still
there's
is called.
There's, like, an illegal moonshine ring, which was trying to help the teacher raise money for like an operation for his son or something like that, or
Oh
just
wait, was
medical
Rakia the name of the
bills.
moonshine? Because it was like a special type of it or something.
It was like a
Some
special type
something was
that
the name of
Ben's
the still.
grandmother liked or something like that.
Something was the name of the still.
Rakia was the name of the moonshine type.
Okay.
And yeah, Ben dies, but then doesn't die because of that cloth. At one point, the cloth gets dirty, and then Whit throws it away, and then the dirt marks form a face and talk to Whit and tell him to pick the cloth back up and stop smiling like that and carry it with him because he's gonna need to use it again soon.
It was like, go save Ben.
Ben gets shot. Whit uses the cloth to save and heal Ben. At one point, Whit tries to use the cloth to save the professor's son in the wheelchair, but it doesn't do anything. What else happens? Whit puts the cloth down like an idiot, and then it's just gone, and the book ends just when Whit needs it because Fiona gets blinded at the end of the book.
Yes, finally.
And some other stuff. Wow.
Well, you know what I mean.
And we all know the cloth's not going to heal her because it hates healing people unless they're injured by guns or swords. It can only heal gun and sword wounds because it was made during biblical times and we had all them guns back then.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
You know that one part when Harold shot all the firstborn sons with a gun? Yeah, or all the sons. These books are so weird.
Yeah,
They're so weird.
So going into this book, my first thought was like, okay, now that we've established when this is happening, we know that the episode, The Journal of Whit, is going to start on Christmas Day of this year. And this book starts, and the last one ends at like in late October. So I was like, we have a really narrow window.
Didn't it mention him trying the wing experiment once?
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting. So I was like, they have a lot to cover because Fiona was already blind at the beginning of the Journal of Whit. Fiona is not yet blind in these books, and there's only a 2-month gap left there. So I was like, they are really gonna have to squeeze this in here, otherwise it is going to be a plot hole. And I was like, I really hope they have the timeline worked out well enough that they aren't gonna forget that that needs to happen very soon. And then the very first scene of this book is the opening scene of the Journal of John Avery Whittaker when he's jumping off the chicken coop with the feathers, which is the episode art for that episode as well. So it's like, oh, that's interesting, because that's the opening scene of the episode, but we don't know when that happened, which just kind of like recalling that story. So
yeah,
it makes
that's
sense.
what I was thinking.
It makes sense he'd be recalling something that happened so recently if he starts writing, if he gets the journal for Christmas, which is only 2 months from now.
Can you imagine like the Journal of John Avery Whittaker? He's just like, haha, frolicking experiment. My mom is blind. I met a friend named Jack today. It was really nice.
Harold is like, John, if you live to be 15, it'll be a miracle. I was like, joke's on you, Dad. I have a magic cloak of eternal life.
Joke's on you, Dad. I don't believe in death. I don't know.
Basically. Yeah, so the book starts in late October because Whit said they've been in Providence a little over 2 months, which leaves about 2 months for Fiona to go blind and Whit to become a Christian. Only a, quote, few days have passed since the epilogue of book 1. Yeah, the timeline is really tight, which I really like. Originally, the concept for the books, according to AIOO Wiki, said that there would be 5 books, and each one was supposed to cover 1 year apiece of Whit's childhood. I was like, well, the first one covered from the end of August until late October, and then this one covers from late October until like late November. So they're not pacing themselves very well so far.
I forgot to mention Emmy and Whit's relationship reminds me so much of Harry and Ron's in Harry Potter, because it's just like, oh, want to be best friends? Okay. And then they fight all the time. And then there's just long stretches of time where they just don't talk to each other.
They
And they
fight
have
a lot.
awkward, like, side glances at each other. And then at school, they're just like, man, I'm really sad. I wish I had someone to talk to. But we're fighting. And then you have, like, moments where it's just like temporary truce. And then they make up and they're like, I'm sorry. And then it happens 5 more times that week, which is the exact same thing that happens in Harry Potter with Harry and Ron.
So this book really dives into the character that we met in the epilogue of the last one, which is Dr. Carl Mongol, who is the guy who translated the phrase for Harold. Not a great choice on Harold's part, I must say. Because
he got a different guy from Europe who I totally trust.
Yeah, it turns out that Dr. Carl Mongol is like absolutely obsessed with the legend of the healing cloth and this ancient journal being protected by like this dynasty of people who are like they're sworn ancient guardians of this artifact, and that he wants it, which just happens to be Whit and the McClintocks.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. So I was talking a couple minutes ago about the idea that the last page of the journal is the page that Blackgaard has that his like mentor found. And I genuinely think that Dr. Carl Mongol might be that mentor that Blackgaard had, who was the archaeologist in South America who found this ancient paper with Whit's name written out just like the last page of the journal, that he sought, that he spent his whole life trying to find this journal, and that I think he's the one who mentors Blackgaard.
Devin, I just realized something.
What?
If these books really do connect to each other in the way we think, they're going to become the key and Union Cross to this series. And it's just going to be like this overarching thing. And then one day they're just going to be super relevant to the main series. I was going to say one day. It's going to be like, great, now we have to deal with this too.
Once Odyssey's equivalent of the Xehanort saga ends, and it's like, here's the new day for the audio series of Adventures in Odyssey, and is all about all of this deep lore that no one knows about who didn't read the
I think you're going to say that no one wants.
I want it.
You're the only one.
Oh, it's so crazy. And I mean, this stuff came out of... It is
crazy.
The stuff in the Blackgaard books came out of absolutely nowhere, and still, I mean, we haven't read the book that came out this April. It's still tied into absolutely nothing there. Which makes me think that it really could be for the purpose of tying them together. I don't want it to be. I really think there's a significant chance that Mongol is Blackgaard's mentor.
I don't want this. Can you imagine, like, someone make a meme where it's like the Imagination Station books, and I click the upgrade button, and then it's the Blackgaard books and the Prophecy, and I say, no, go back.
You don't need that.
I like the Blackgaard books. I don't like the Prophecy. If I had to choose between the books, I would put the Blackgaard books on top, because I actually legitimately really, really like them. I think they add a lot to canon, because you get all the thoughts and everything on everyone. It made me like Glossman's character.
Yeah.
Like, I liked Glossman. It made me love Glossman. And like, what is that nonsense? And yeah, the only downside I'd say is the Prophecy stuff. Like, I love...
It was like one page.
Yeah, I know, but it was so weird, and it was just out of nowhere, and I can't stop thinking about it every single day since I read it. Like, what the heck was that? You know I'm right.
I know.
And, like, I love the way that it wrote and adapted everything. Like, Connie Goes to Camp.
I know, it did it spectacularly.
It did. Connie Goes to Camp so good. And it made it, like, one paragraph, basically. But it was so good. And, like, it knows what to focus on and stuff. And, like, for these young Whit books, I just didn't have as good a time reading them, really. It took me a while to get through them, which you can attest to.
I noticed.
And, like, I just didn't find them as interesting and stuff. And I think a part of it is the fact that, like, Jack isn't there, which, yeah, call me biased. I'm super biased. What else is new? But, they're just really weird. And then the Imagination Station books, I'm not even going to get into that. They're not really worth talking about.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like Blackgaard books, great. these books, imagination station books, bad. So they're like, it's the metric to judge all Odyssey books from.
Yeah.
This is
So
the scale. These
Whit
are where the pieces
Whit is
lie.
in the woods. He meets Paul and Steve, and it's pretty obvious immediately that they're Dr. Mongol's sons.
I didn't
Um,
figure it out. I wasn't paying enough attention.
Honestly, cloak of youth or not, it really is amazing that Whit survived as long as he did. When he was like out in the woods boiling and mixing sulfur and KNO3 and herbs and
Yeah.
whatnot and rubbing it on his skin and leaving it on there for more than a day. How has he survived this long? I don't
I
care
remember I was
if
reading
he
that and
has.
I was just like, I don't know much about science, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to like be that close to sulfur in this manner. And then I was just like, oh wait, this is also when they had lead toys. Carry on.
Potassium nitrate is like what's used in fertilizer to make bombs, and Whit is boiling that and sulfur and leaves that he found in the woods and just rubbing it on his skin and letting it dry and stay there for days.
He knows he's not gonna die.
Like the crazy thing about the first book versus the second book is in the first book, I said it was like a young Indiana Jones, but I didn't expect that to mean that the second book it would become adult Indiana Jones, because like we have Whit and his father, who is a professor, who are teaming up against a German scientist who is trying to steal an ancient biblical artifact that's magic from them. It's literally Indiana Jones 3.
Okay, but to be fair, there's Nazis in like every Indiana Jones movie.
The crazy thing, as you said, is that these books just shed an absolutely fascinating new perspective on Whit's role in the Jesus cloth. And
I
Whit's
need
like
to re-listen
Whit's
to that
I know,
episode,
me too.
but I really don't want to.
Whit's entire career in archaeology, I feel like, is recontextualized by this.
Do you think this is why he got interested in archaeology? He's like, I'm gonna get the jump on the object before it gets the jump on me and
Yeah.
ruins my life.
Literally gets the jump on me since it can talk and whatnot.
Oh my gosh, I was imagining it looking like Dimple, the cloth.
I mean, it wasn't the
I don't know
cloth that was
why.
talking. I mean, it was just a vision. It could have been the face of Jesus and a piece of toast. It doesn't matter. Matters a little bit, apparently.
I think it matters. I
Um,
wish it didn't, but I think it does.
the thing that's interesting to me is at the end of the first book, I was like, I feel like this whole chest and the cloth and stuff is going to be like the overarching story for the whole series of books, and then there's going to be like a plot mysteries that Whit solves with each story. But I was 6 chapters into this book, and I was like, we've had like 2 separate pages about what I assume is the main mystery in this book, and the entire rest of the book so far has been just about the journal and the cloth. Like
Yeah, it wasn't really about much.
I still think
like, I think that's why I was so confused when they're just like moonshine and stuff, and I was just like, I thought we were talking about. So I think these books need a bit more focus.
I feel like conceptually the moonshine thing was supposed to be the A plot for the story, but it only got 20% of the focus in terms of runtime.
Like I think they need a lot more focus.
And
also,
I mean,
like,
the title of the book is after the cloth, not after the moonshine thing.
I feel like I don't want to say there needs to be more consequences, because there obviously are consequences to the characters' actions and stuff like that,
But
and
not
you do
to their
feel
deaths, because they just pop right
not
back
to their
on
deaths, unless you're Janeth, I guess,
or Jackson.
or Jackson. But like there were so many scenes where like something really creepy happened to Whit, or like something that could mean someone's gonna try to kill him or something, and then it just cuts, like the chapter ends because cliffhanger, and then it just like is the next day and he's looking for frogs with his friends in the forest. And I'm like,
Whit does not fear death. He does, however, fear coffins, and I'm glad that they're kind of like repeatedly like exploring the ways that the traumas of his mother's death is like still affecting him psychologically.
I like that too, and the fact that he actually went into shock after Fiona was blinded.
Yeah.
And like he just flipped out and stuff. I thought that was really good.
Yes. I liked how throughout the book they kept on like blind baiting us with
gosh.
Fiona, because I knew it had to happen soon. I was like, it is almost certainly going to happen in this book if they follow the timeline correctly. And then Fiona's like, oh yeah, I talked to the neighbor and they have horses, so I'm going to be riding the horses and stuff. And Whit's like, I want to ride the horses with you, Fiona. I was like, and she's like, no, I'm taking Charlie this Saturday, John Avery. Sometime soon we'll ride together. I'm like, And then she's like, today, John, we're going out. We're going to ride the horses. I was like, And then it cuts to the end of the day. They're like, boy, this sure was a fun day. I was like, and then she had a line or something. She's like, I'm not blind, John Avery. I can see what's going on. I was like, Dave. And then the book ended, and it was like, and then the epilogue happened, and then she's like,
oh, like, no, in that second, like, horse fake out, there's one line where Whit was just like, I just can't see what, like, God is trying to do in my life. And then Fiona's just like, you will someday, or something like that. And it's just like, then the narration was just like, and like something big was going to happen to him that night, which would show him like the importance of everything that was going on.
Yeah.
He was going to go search for more clues with the Scooby Gang, and I was just like, screw you, Dave Arnold. And it's funny because Devin told me that like there were fake outs with Fiona and the blindness thing, so like I knew she wasn't gonna get blinded in that second thing because I figured out that was like the one fake out that got Devin that he told me about, like really vaguely and stuff, but like it still got me regardless, even though I knew she wasn't actually gonna get blinded.
The thing is, if you didn't know the timeline as well as I did, you would figure like, oh, Fiona has to go blind at some point, and she hasn't yet, so clearly it'll happen at some point. And you would probably also be faked out by these things, just knowing it has to happen at some point. This seems like
unless you're
right
me
point.
and Devin and you know all the dialogue word for word from.
But then there was me who knew specifically that right now we are in mid-November, and it has to happen within the next month. So it's not just like, oh, it has to happen at some point, so maybe this is it. I knew it had to happen imminently, and the sooner the better, because it has to give Whit enough time to go through all of like the stuff that happened after and the emotional processing before he becomes a Christian, and then a little bit of time after that, clearly, before the journal starts. And that's only a month away. So it had to happen very quick. So I was like, I knew that it had to happen soon. So I had like the extra impetus for it, and so I got like super extra faked out by Dave's teasing because of my like obsessive knowledge of the timeline.
I was just waiting for them because I'm like really, I don't know, it like really bothers me when a scene is like retold from a different perspective or something like that, and it like has different dialogue.
Yeah.
So I always make sure like I know what the original dialogue was. Like you see those
well, it happened
so
in
much
the Blackgaard novels quite a bit.
Like, yeah, it happened in Blackgaard novels. It happened when Fiona was blinded and stuff, they called, and the scene leading up to that, like what was called Johnny, Charlie had dialogue. Whit censored Charlie out of all the dialogue.
You redacted her existence.
Which makes it a little sad. If you want to think about it that way. But I was just thinking like shows like Winx Club are really guilty of this, where it ends on a cliffhanger and then it like starts the next episode a couple seconds before the last one ended, and it's like shot from a different angle, and like kind of like the thing the characters are conveying is the same, but all the dialogue is different, and it always bothered me so much when TV shows did that. And I was just like, I'm gonna accept the first thing I heard as the canonical dialogue, and yeah, so I was like waiting for them to talk about everything. You told me that they talked about Macduff and had that conversation, and I know for a fact that that is what they were talking about right before she got blinded.
Yeah.
So as soon as they started talking about that, I recognized all the other dialogue surrounding it, and I was just like, it's gonna happen now.
Well, as soon as it happened in the epilogue, I was like, oh, here we go, because the last epilogue was like, oh, by the way, Whit stabbed a dog, and also he has a magic cloth. So when this epilogue started and they're on the horses, I was like, okay, yeah, the epilogues in these stories are just like gut punches.
Whit stabs a dog. Whit blinds his stepmom. What's Whit gonna do next, kids?
So Whit goes to the university, and he is like just sneaking through the offices and eavesdropping and like reading people's books and stuff. We got the full titles of Harold's undergrad, master's, and PhD, as well as each school and each year for all of them, which was amazing. I like,
And it was called Of Men and Angels.
Yeah.
Whit plagiarized.
we talked. Well, I don't think a degree is called that. Did it have a thesis title in one of them? I don't remember now.
I don't know.
Perhaps. I liked, and we talked about this before, how they keep on like making all these stretches to connect to future Whit stuff. Like they're like, here's what inspired the Wad Fam Chalk Sod. And I just hope that once Jack
That
shows
was
up,
weird.
I hope that once Jack shows up, he gets a parallel scene that shows how it inspired his Locono Straw Mall later. I'm glad that Whit told Harold about the journal so he could get advice, since his dad clearly knows that Mongol is mildly deranged over this. I still don't get why they have to outsource the translation. Surely they can just get Latin and English to Greek dictionaries and do it themselves. It seems a lot safer than handing it to a third party. Surely his dad would already speak Latin and Greek.
We need to talk about Harold.
Yeah, we can do it after this note. So it seems so much safer than handling it to a third party. My trust of Harold is very confusing right now. If there are individual phrases in the translation that are confusing or highly idiomatic, then you can request isolated translations from a trusted source of small phrases, or break the sources up so that no person you ask about it knows too much, just like how Whit gave Harold an isolated fragment through an intermediary to translate for safety. And then Whit, in the same conversation, look at him refracting his dad into letting him go trick-or-treating. I like agreeable Harold, and I also like sneaky Whit being like, I'm gonna do Halloween, Dad, and then later in the future, I'm gonna make kids not do Halloween.
I did not like Fiona in the Halloween scenes.
She was very stern about that.
Like kids, okay, like little kids.
We're like, we're gonna go
like,
trick-or-treating. She's like,
little...
okay, I guess that's fine then if you want to go worship Satan or whatever.
Yeah, like little kids in like princess and like bumblebee costumes or something like that, like come up to the door and she's like, oh, what are you little heathens? And he's like, I'm a puppy dog. She's just like, oh, you're all gonna go to hell. Here's some candy. Goodbye. And they're like, and she's also like, we don't worship, like, we don't do your heathen things, but we do All Saints Day. Here's a cake. Get out of my house. You hobo, get in here. But yeah, I was just like sitting there reading it, and I was just like, Fiona, you're talking to like 6-year-olds. Calm down.
Yeah, she was a little overbearing. Anyway, sorry. Please relay your emotions regarding Harold Whittaker.
I'm confused. I don't know what to feel. Does he seem like really mean to you?
He does. In
comparison to how you thought he would be?
No, I always thought he was like very stern, because he's like a very like old-fashioned, like conservative intellectual professor father in the 30s. So I always imagined he would be like extremely like stern, corporal punishment, very like unemotional towards his children.
See, I always thought he would kind of be like maybe a little strict, but like pretty warm and stuff.
No, I always thought
and
that
Whit he's just like very mean.
I always thought that Whit had to get his issues with dealing with family members from Harold.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. He likes Charlie so much more than Whit. He has a favorite child.
The one that he's had for 2 years.
Yeah. He's like, oh, I was going to say something horrible.
It's interesting because Harold has so many secrets that he doesn't want to tell Whit. And I get it, because it's like, he's his dad and he thinks that Whit isn't emotionally ready to handle these secrets, especially because it concerns arguments between Harold and Janeth and Jackson, who are both dead and aren't there to defend themselves. And like Whit thinks the world of them. And so he doesn't want to like foist that emotional baggage onto Whit. And I understand that. There's like the pages that he's hiding from the Bible that are like in his drawers and stuff like that. But it's hard because, like, at points in the book, he really does seem like, you know what, Whit, I'm going to be the cool dad. I'm going to help you, like, figure out this mystery. We can do this
there were
together.
parts where I liked him.
We won't tell anyone. But then he's like, I'm going to take the book and we're going to send it. Which, first off, makes absolutely no sense. You can transcribe the book and send a copy. You don't have to send the original book overseas. That is, I would never trust that. Ever.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Like, I didn't want him to send it.
You can just transcribe the words and then send that. That would be much safer than trusting the postal system. If I absolutely had to get the physical book to the person, I wouldn't use the mail. I would put it in my suitcase. I would travel there, bring it to them in person if it's that important.
Honestly, when Harold said, we're going to take it there, I was just like, we're going to travel to Europe. And he's like, no, we're going to mail it. And I was like, what if it gets lost in the mail?
Yeah, I don't trust the mail. I especially don't trust mail in the 30s. They didn't have
old mail.
You couldn't
old-timey mail.
You couldn't, like, track USPS packages online in 1935.
They didn't even have Google. Want to hear the horrible thing I almost said a minute ago when you were talking about Harold?
But no, I was gonna say, like, just a second, that it's like that on the one hand, but then he's like, I'm gonna send it away, and Whit is like getting like weird instincts about his dad and like not trusting him, and that he's gonna like backstab Whit with this. And I was like, what are you up to, Harold? I don't know.
He's acting weird.
I want to trust you because you have
I want to trust him.
You have the power to make things a lot easier and keep Whit out of trouble while he's doing it. So I like you for the convenience of what you represent. But I don't trust you as a person as far as I could throw you. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I almost said before right after I said Harold definitely plays favorites and likes Charlie more than Whit, I almost jokingly said it's because he thinks that Charlie's going to live for longer than Whit, because Whit's only going to live till 15. And then I remember Charlie dies at a young age, and that's not funny at all, especially since,
Yeah, I was impressed though with Harold that he like realized that like Mongol was cuckoo bananas. Because I was worried that when Whit talked to Harold, Harold was going to be like, nonsense, let's take all this material and give it right to him. I trust him completely because I'm an adult and he's an adult. And
I love Harold's reaction to like Whit telling him that he thinks Mangel's up to something, and Harold's like, "Oh, you mean that crazy guy down the hallway? Yeah, he's insane. Let's go gossip about him at the malt shop." And I was just like, "Heck yeah!"
That made me happy.
Father-son bonding activities. Am I right?
Whit's reaction to being alone with Dr. Mongol when they were at the university, it was just the two of them, his reaction is exactly why you trust kids when they say that they don't trust or don't want to hug or be around a certain adult.
Yeah.
That's all I could think of in that scene, and Whit is like, I don't know what it is, but he really creeps me out. I don't want to be here near him. I don't feel safe with him alone. And I was thinking about all these posts that talk about like when kids say that about an adult, like trust their instinct over like the way that you worry that someone else might think about like appearances or whatever. Trust their instinct. And I was like, this is a great example of that. Kids pick up on things that adults do not. Yeah, it's so risky to mail it overseas. You could transcribe it all and mail it. It's just Latin and Greek and stuff. This is an American Ivy League university in the 30s. I guarantee you at least 85% of the professors here are fluent in Latin.
I just found out there's
I'm sure
a good
Harold would absolutely be fluent in Latin and Greek based on like his background and his degrees. He studies like religious history and artifacts. He is fluent in Hebrew. He absolutely would know Latin and Greek.
I'm surprised he didn't just do it himself.
It's so like even beyond that, it's definitely not something he wouldn't have been able to just properly copy unless the calligraphy was completely illegible. And then send that copy off to someone.
Maybe Harold's illiterate and he just passed like through like by having Janeth read him everything, but then he couldn't let the secret get out, so he had to kill Janeth and then marry Fiona as a cover-up, and that's why he has to like send the letter down, and he can't just copy it himself because he can't write either. Ooh, did I blow your mind? I'm coming up with so many good theories.
Yeah.
First the Parent Trap thing, and now this.
So we get the first tease with Fiona and the horses happens. Fiona's like, oh, the neighbors have horses. We can ride them whenever. And I was like, oh, it's happening. And
You're
I was
like, how about we don't?
And that's when I suddenly realized, I was like, the healing cloth is going to factor into Fiona losing her sight and that story, which is crazy. And it'll be interesting because Mongol wants to take the cloth from Whit to heal his boys, and now Whit is going to be faced with this, like, do I try and heal Fiona and her blindness with it? And it's going to be really interesting. And I was trying to formulate, like, how exactly is this going to go down?
It's not going to work. I've already figured out the pattern. Have you figured out the pattern?
What, you mean, like, that the kids get, if it's swords and guns? No, I mean, it's that they didn't think that they needed to be healed, or they didn't want to be healed.
Actually, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say, like, it's... Well, if you want to go off of what, like... What was the kid's name in the wheelchair?
Paul or Steven, it was one of the two. One of them had,
Steven's the one in the wheelchair. He was talking about, like, how it was God's will and stuff like that. So it's God's will that Whit not stab a dog and Fiona go blind.
No, I mean, what I was thinking about was the story of Jesus meeting the lame guy, where he goes up to him. It's at the bath, I think, like the Bath of Solomon in Jerusalem. And he asks him, like, what do you want me to heal, or like, what do you want me to do for you? And the guy's like, I want you to fix my legs, please. And Jesus is like, okay, your legs are fixed. And I've heard multiple sermons that focus on, like, the fact that Jesus didn't, like, assume what he wanted him to do for that person, like, because Jesus could have done many things besides heal his legs, both spiritually and physically. But he asked him, what is it that you want me to do for you? And Paul and Stephen, whichever one it was, wasn't, like, asking to be healed of this. Fiona wasn't asking to get her vision back in that moment, although they didn't use the cloth on Fiona yet. But in the other cases where it happened, those were cases where it was like, so it's basically like, are you asking God to heal you? Because if you aren't, if that's not what you're seeking from God, then it's not going to do it. You have to ask for it, is kind of thing. And it, like, connects back to that story with Jesus that I worded really awkwardly. But that's basically how I was thinking about it. So they go out on Halloween. They're going to make their way to this spoopy abandoned mansion and find this still coffin under the floorboards and whatnot. So they're like, Paul and Steven are like, oh yeah, we got these eggs and soap, and we're going to, like, egg houses and stuff if they don't give us candy. I was like, people actually did that? Like, kids actually would egg and soap houses if they didn't get candy? Like, what on earth?
Yeah. You didn't know that?
I didn't think there was a thing that kids actually did. I mean, I know people egg houses in general, but I didn't think it was like, oh, we'll go out on Halloween, they will give us candy, or we will, like, wreck their houses. I was like, what are you, nightmare children? No wonder Fiona doesn't want you going out. I get it now.
Yeah, I've heard
were a
of
nightmare.
kids doing that before. Like, not nowadays, but, like, in things.
Yeah, because everyone has Nest cams in their front yards now.
I've heard, like, people say in, like, things like, hey, let's give them candy, or they'll egg our houses. Or they'll TP our houses. Or
Yeah.
they'll eat our dog. I don't know.
These books have so solidly cemented me in understanding Whit's reaction to Charlie getting engaged to Wilson, because when I first listened to Charlotte, I thought Whit was being so unreasonable, getting angry when he found out about it, but I really understand now.
Yeah, Wilson is very bad. And especially the fact that, like, the person Wilson... Like, especially the fact that Wilson, I don't want to say has a love interest, but, like, has a romantic interest in his own eyes when it comes to Emmy. The fact that Emmy's Whit's best friend, and, like, he's seen how Wilson acts towards people he likes.
Yeah.
And then to have that attention directed towards his little sister.
His baby sister, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also interesting, and I don't remember if this came by the end of the book. I don't think it did. that Whit's experiment still hasn't finished being set up and still hasn't come into play, it's extremely dangerous because currently it's 2 wires dangling down to ground level that are connected to a lightning rod.
Yeah, and the policeman always sees him there, and he's like, having fun, not dying, but almost dying. And Whit's like, you bet, officer.
So incredibly dangerous, and Whit hasn't made those fixes that Ben suggested at this point. I don't remember if he did by the end.
I think he might have.
Another inspiration moment, he looks at the Granville house, and he thinks about an ornate building that you could explore forever and find new adventures and surprises. And I was like... It's
like someone opening their arms to give you a big hug, and you're like, I'll pass.
I'm so impressed with young Whit because he's so much more devious and rule breaking than I ever expected, and I'm so proud of him.
Honestly, I really like that his parents were like, "You're not doing Halloween," and he was like, "Nah, I am," and then he did.
Yeah, there's more red flags, like we said before. Fiona literally says, "I'm not blind, John Avery." And I was like...
And Whit was like, "You're right, you're not. Silly me."
Also, Whit said that he has this impending sense of doom that felt similar to how he felt right before Jackson died. And I was like... Okay, so finally we find out what the cloth's deal is. Because Whit finds in the books that he's stealing from the university, we find out that the cloth is supposed to be the cloak of Saint Gamaliel. And so I looked it up. He is a real person. According to Wikipedia, tradition of the Eastern Orthodox Church holds that Gamaliel's relics were found on August 2nd or 3rd in the 5th century, which lines up with the text that Harold and Carlin Whit found, and that he was found with his son and Stephen and Nicodemus, which also matches up precisely with what says in the books. He is briefly mentioned in the books of Acts as the president of the Sanhedrin who is sympathetic to Christianity, unlike a lot of the other religious leaders at the time. And then he's further mentioned a lot in the Talmud for various teachings and such. And then all of the rest of those things, 2 pages later, the book confirmed all of the details that I read about him on Wikipedia. So, oh yeah, I forgot. I guess it doesn't actually say it explicitly in the book. So Whit, it says in the book the last untranslated Greek phrase that hadn't been translated yet, and so I typed it into Google Translate, and it means, so I guess you might not know this then, Victoria. I've kind of mentioned it, but I forgot it isn't translated in the book into English. The last Greek phrase that's written there, I translated it. It means the clothes of the inn is the name that they called it. So yeah, the cloth.
Oh, so it really is Jesus' baby cloth?
The cloth is what was used to swaddle Jesus as a baby in the manger.
So how did... Never mind Whit. Let's forget about Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
Billion question mark or exclamation marks, question marks, whatever, quotation marks.
Yeah.
For a second. Let's talk about that one sympathetic guy you were
Gamaliel.
just talking about. How did he get it?
Well, he got a vision, right, from Stephen, who told him where to find it, didn't he? Wait, no, sorry. It was the monk who had a vision, and Gamaliel told him where to find the cloth. So I guess if Mary and Joseph saved it, and then it passed to Jesus, gave it to his disciples or something, then it could have ended up in the hands of Stephen, and then been buried with Stephen, and Stephen was in the same grave with Gamaliel there.
And then Whit found the plates that have the Book of Mormon on them in his backyard.
And then, I guess, Whit's family, basically, the McClintocks, or some branch of them, is basically, descended all the way back from whatever this monk's name was. I have it written down at the beginning of here. Father Lucian of Kafar Gamala in 415 AD. And then it gets passed down for 1,600 years, or 1,500 years, through their family. So, honestly, when they're this is the last untranslated Greek phrase in the passage, and I was typing it, I was if this translate to John Avery Whittaker, I swear, if this is the prophecy. Oh yeah, and then so Whit reads the journal, as we talked about before. He finds out about his parents' secret drama. It was a very Leonard Thelma kind of drama going on.
It was actually.
Because
It
it's
reminded
like,
me of Leonard and his dad.
yeah, Whit had this like critical life and death kind of accident, it sounds like, and he was saved by the cloth, and Harold figured out something was going on, but Jackson and Janet didn't trust him enough to tell him what it was, and he gave them an ultimatum, and they didn't listen, and so he just up and left, and then that is when he went to Israel, where he met Mongol, was after he like ran away from his family for an unknown period of time. So it's interesting because, like, given that Harold is already aware of these events and now knows that Jackson had a journal talking about the cloth, he may have already surmised that Jackson and likely Whit was/is in possession thereof.
These books are so confusing.
I know. So the book basically ends. They find the still. Oh wait, sorry, no. This isn't what I'm talking about. This was another tease, another horse tease. The chapter starts with a picture of a horse, and I'm like, that can't possibly be good.
Another horse tease. Add that to the list of good phrases we've said in this podcast.
Yeah, horse baiting, as like you are blind baiting. So, as I said before, and we've said multiple times, I really like how you can interject this whole cloth thing into the story, because in Thank You God, we were hearing Whit's telling of the story, not the story itself, and obviously he's going to unreliably narrate it to leave out the ancient magic Jesus baby blanket, and also...
But I don't know why. I think it would have been a lot less convoluted if he brought it into
left
that
out how his
20-minute
dad
episode.
left his family when he was 2 and all that stuff. Could you imagine? This is like the first Thanksgiving he's spending with Connie and June and stuff like that.
And Rodney. And we're just sitting there, and it's like that picture of Lisa from The Simpsons where she's just sitting at the table like that. And everyone's just listening to this, and they're like, what's going on?
Oh, man.
Can you imagine if, like, someone stole Whit's shoes as a prank and they put them in the transmuter, and this entire book series was just like Matthew or someone in the or Connie in the transmuter as seeing like Whit's childhood, so she finally knows secrets before like everyone else, and she's just
before
like,
Renee.
What is happening? Yeah, she finds out things instead of Renee.
Yeah, so Whit has even more prophetic visions and dreams. Fiona is racing on the horses with Whit. She challenges him to a race, and then it's still not anything. I can very much understand now why Ben said in the first book that he had issues with his relationship with his dad. I was like, that's valid. I get it now.
It is valid.
Also, I like how Whit just can't, in the same way that Eugene can't get away from inside job bank robberies, Whit can't get away from mysteries involving illegal moonshine operations. So we are fully confirming here then, because what I kept on thinking is like, the cloth, probably not a miracle cloth. It's probably just like, there's some like God stuff happening, but then some other things that happens that Whit isn't realizing, and it's all just kind of like an unintentional illusion, and it's going to be about like how Whit needs to not trust in like, you know, it's like the Jesus cloth. It's like power comes from God, not from these artifacts. It wasn't actually the cloth the whole time. Macduff, like someone just came by and saw the dog and like, you know, sewed up the wound or whatever and tied him up and folded the cloth. And then the other stuff was hearsay because it was this ancient story he was reading from 1500 years ago. So I honestly thought the cloth is not, you know, magic isn't the right word, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not actually like all like crazy spiritual and stuff, the cloth itself. And then like,
it's so weird.
Because I was like, the thing with Macduff, I was like, it's true. I thought that's where it was going, and then the thing with Ben happens. So the thing with Macduff wasn't just a misdirect. The story from Father Lucian wasn't just hearsay, because Ben was shot fatally, he was bleeding out, and then all of a sudden, there was, not only was he not dying, but the wound was closed, there was no scar, there was no blood anywhere on Ben or the ground or his clothes or the cloth. There was still a bullet hole in his shirt on both sides and nothing on his body. It is actually what everyone is saying it is. And I was like, I have no idea where this will go from here now. Maybe it didn't work on Steve because he didn't feel the need to be healed, like we said before. And then in the epilogue, it happens dead on schedule. November 26th, 1935 is the day that Fiona lost her sight, because they keep on talking about dates throughout this, so it was very easy to track from Halloween, and then for later from Thanksgiving, it was very easy to track what days things were happening on precisely. And so, yeah, when Fiona was blinded, it was on November 26th, 1935. It was an excellent recreation of the original scene, and thank you, God. I'm fine with the line changes, given that it was Whit's own recollection, including the lack of Charlie's mention there. She basically only had one line in the whole epilogue, so it makes sense that Whit didn't mention her in the story. It's crazy that we now know that Whit only told Fiona about Macduff and the chocolate batter and the wedding dress as a litmus test for telling her about his family's secret dynastic vow to protect Jesus' swaddling cloth of eternal youth. So that's interesting. The only key event from Whit's...
as you do.
Yeah. The only big key event from Whit's youth that we knew of before that I still don't know where to place in the timeline, whether it's in Scotland or America or what, is when Charlie ran away from home because Whit wouldn't let her play with his toys, and then she almost starved to death over 3 days. It must have been...
As you do.
It must have been after they came to America, because Charlie would have been less than 3 years old when they came over, which is admittedly a little bit younger than she seems in Journal of Whit, but... Yeah, and then the end of the book happens, and I was like, that was not how I saw things going at all. I thought that Whit wouldn't get the chance to use the cloth on Stephen before Fiona would go blind. Like, I thought Fiona would go blind first. Whit would try it on her. It wouldn't work. He'd learn a lesson about how true healing comes from God and not from objects, and then they would learn that there's an alternate explanation for the Macduff thing. It was never the cloth. But no, Whit clearly and explicitly saves Ben's life with it, and the face of the ghost of Rusty Gamaliel told him to, and it works very explicitly, and then Harold knows about it, and then Mongol has stolen it. It is so much more interesting than I could have anticipated. I can't wait for the next book. And so that leaves us going into the next book with basically these 4 threads that I can think of. There's who is the mystery boy, Ben's burns and scars that they've brought up.
Who is the mystery boy? Do you actually think it's Jack?
No, it doesn't make sense.
I don't think it makes sense either. But you said it earlier.
I know. Well, I was like, I don't know, because he keeps reappearing, and Jack was poor, but like clearly Whit would recognize him when he shows up in May, if that was the case. So I don't think that makes sense. They're sticking to canon, previously established canon, too closely for them to let that be Jack. So there's a mystery boy, Ben's like burns and scars that they've mentioned multiple times in detail, so it has to mean something. There's the cloak in the journal mystery, obviously, and then who folded up the cloak and tied up Macduff in the first epilogue, which could be the mystery boy, could be someone else. And so I think those are like the open storylines that are still mysteries at the end of that book. And those are the young Whit books, Victoria. That is what we've been missing out on all these years from understanding Whit's life.
Do we really have to rate these?
Yes, 5 out of 5 for both of them.
Are you serious?
I am serious.
I don't believe you.
I mean it. You know, I'll give a 4.9 to the second book because I felt like the plot balancing seemed kind of weird for the concept of what it seems like the book series should be. Like the balance of it all was strange in terms of like A plot, B plot stuff. Yeah.
I'm gonna give both I don't know, 3. I think. I don't know. They're weird.
They are. I love it. It's so ambitious to choose to do them as wildly strange as they did.
I don't hate them. I want to get that across.
It's just it's such a bold move.
I'm middling towards them. So, I think 3 is fair for me. I'm still figuring out my thoughts. I'll probably talk about it more in the future. I may change my mind along the way. I don't know. They're strange. Like I said, I don't think they're bad. I just don't think they're great or as good as the Blackgaard novels are. I do like Whit, a young version of Whit as a protagonist, though. I like him as a protagonist a lot more than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm. He
'Cause I
doesn't feel
wasn't
as
sure
OP
what I
in the
would.
second book as he did in the first one.
He
When he
still
was
feels pretty OP.
the thing was, it's like they gave him both like this like hyper intelligence, like, oh, I can invent things super quick and MacGyver stuff, and like I read Sherlock Holmes when I was 4 years old. But then they were also like, oh, I can Vulcan pinch bullies and know martial arts.
And you're like, at least make him an idiot.
It was like, I know that he's a Mary Sue, but he's 9 here, so let's let's dial it back a little. So do you have any other thoughts? I feel like we've talked pretty extensively. There's just so much content to cover. It was Victoria's idea to do both books in one video.
I think it was a good idea.
I do agree overall.
Otherwise,
it's
we
just
would
a
have had to
lot.
wait longer.
Yes, it is just a lot to talk about. There's so much.
We're gonna start doing this with more book reviews. Do knock out more in one video.
Yeah, because there's a lot of books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like these because it gave so much lore and it did a really good job at like being really consistent with things that I knew had to happen, while also subverting my expectations in ways I could not imagine. And I just think it's really interesting in terms of like the way that general kind of theological ideas are handled in this show normally, that they just decided to take like really bold and surprising, interesting kind of fantastical stances with these books. And I admire that. There's like it's a brave move, I guess, to be like, this is what we're doing. Whit is having like constant divine like visions and dreams, and he's like, there are rust spots that are talking to him from ghosts of ancient saints and stuff.
It's weird.
Like whether or not, it's not even speaking to whether or not you agree with certain parts of theology. I just think it's like really interesting that they decided to like, we're gonna go with this, and then we're just going crank it to 11, pedal to the metal, full max.
I mean, let me just say, I do sincerely think if you're gonna do something weird in literally any kind of medium or story or anything like that, you should go all the way, because I will respect if you go all the way instead of just going halfway and making it really weird and vague and then kind of alluding to something but never actually doing anything with it.
Yeah.
But like my favorite examples of things going all the way are usually like with
Gravity
cheesy
Falls.
things like Clue and Series of Unfortunate Events.
Yeah.
They're probably like the two cheesiest things I've ever seen, but they're both like, they really go into it. And you can just tell like everyone's having a good time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially Neil Patrick Harris.
Yeah, so those are the first 2 Whit books. I'd forgotten that you didn't probably know that, because I forgot it was only written in the Greek and not in English, that it was like Jesus's swaddling cloth from Bethlehem.
Yeah. I did not know that. I did assume it was, though.
I was doing it on the bus, and so it was difficult because I had to type it into Google Translate, but it was in Greek, and so I had to really fiddle with like the flipping the keyboard thing to convince the phone to type in a Greek alphabet using an English keyboard. And there were some letters that was hard to make it figure out what I wanted, but I managed to get it through and get it to translate properly.
Yeah.
Unlike if it was on my computer, then I could have just switched to the Greek keyboard that I have on my hotbar.
But you didn't.
But I didn't, because I wanted to know now, and I didn't want to take the time to just put my laptop on the hotspot of my phone. So what are we talking about next time, Victoria?
Malachi's Message, Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
And In a Faraway Land? Part 2?
No, In a Sun-Scorched Land.
I was close. I was close.
Yes.
I'll take it.
And then probably the predictions for the next album, because I think it is coming out imminently. AIOO Wiki is down right now, so I can't check precise dates, but I think it is coming out very soon, and so we should do predictions for that before it happens. Or after, who knows? We're very late on things. This episode was supposed to come out in February. Say la vie.
Do you have something to say to me, Devin?
No. You have been very busy, Victoria, and I understand that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all for now. That's what we're doing next time. Until then, thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And my laptop is almost dead.
And you have been watching episode 167 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast.
Oddcast. I said it super early so it would sync. Did it sync?
Yeah, it was close on my end.
Really?
Yeah.
I said it like so early. I said it like 5 minutes early. Okay. Bye.
Bye.